Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah, clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Friday, February 11th, and the talk of the town right now is this term called inflation. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it on our show. You've read about it. Anywhere you look, what is Biden doing about this inflation? But you've also probably heard about this trucker situation happening. It started in Canada, a trucker protest, a small group of truckers, let's be very clear, but trucks are big. So it might look like it's a lot more and they might get a lot of media attention. Of course, the media loves this stuff. The media is talking about, oh no, the truckers are now coming to the US. The truckers are descending on the US. They're at the border. They're holding up shipments at the border, but they might go to the Super Bowl. They might protest the State of the Union. What are we going to do? These are truckers, of course, who are angry at the mandates, about the vaccination mandates, vaccinations that, of course, make them healthier and safer to drive. But is this really about the mandates? Is this really about, these protests? Is this really even about Biden? Of course not. The right wing has been so skillful at political jiu-jitsu for decades. It is, they know very well that they are the party of the elites. You don't have to be told that. And they will do whatever it takes to create division. They will do whatever it takes to tap into cultural trends, whether it's CRT, which is really about school boards, which is really about teachers' unions, which are the largest funders of the Democratic Party, largest public service employees as well. It's never about what they say it is. We know that. But this has taken a whole other level. The insurrection went too far. And if the Democrats were smart, if Biden were smart in these midterms, they would literally just associate every single Republican, anti-Trump or not, with the insurrectionists, because the RNC has politically endorsed the insurrectionists at this point, saying it's just political discourse. Of course it wasn't. People were murdered. It was terrorism. It wasn't a riot. It was terrorism. And if Democrats are smart, they would use this moment to remind folks that even the Republicans who may not be Trumpsters but still associate with the RNC are part of that tribe. This is the moment for that. But what are the Republicans doing? What is the far right doing? What is the Bannon movement doing? They know that is what Democrats, if they were smart, are going to tap into. Because you even pull away the most reasonable Republicans because they don't want to be affiliated. We're talking about voters with the insurrectionists. Mitch McConnell knows that. He denounced them. He wants to keep the Senate. He wants his power. He wants to win the Senate, I should say. So what is Bannon doing? He realizes that right now there's a moment of instability, economic instability. They've done everything they can to pull a few people from this movement, pull a few people from that movement, tap into anger over here, tap into moms who are angry or just were taught to be angry about history class. They do this all over the country. They tap into different groups, 2% here, 1% there, 0.5% there, keep those folks down so that they don't vote, attack the Democratic Party for being elitists. They're attacking Joe Biden because of inflation. Finally, reporters are recognizing that, well, inflation doesn't actually have to do with everything the Republicans have said. It's not really a Biden thing, although he could do some things about it. Turns out many CEOs around this country that have churned their companies that have churned record profits, whether it's Exxon, whether it's McDonald's, whether it's Starbucks. These are companies that have shown record profits, and they are increasing the prices of their goods, not because of supply chain issues, but because they're choosing to make more money. Meanwhile, they're sticking it to their workers, which is why you're seeing people organizing in Starbucks all over the country. I think we're at 74 unions now, Starbucks locations trying to unionize, which is why you're seeing protests and strikes at John Deere, at Kellogg's, which is why you're seeing Amazon workers, of course, organize, because it just doesn't make sense. What does that have to do with the truckers? The truckers are part of the supply chain. So Let's disrupt the supply chain a little bit more. Even if that's not the cause, let's just do it a little bit more. And reports are saying it might, because they're trying to create a movement of truckers who, let's remind you all, long haul truckers spend over 300 days on a road, average, a year. Right-wing radio is basically wired right into their channels. They're listening to right-wing radio. They're listening to what's happening. They're almost overwhelmingly conservative. And guess what? They're really upset about these mandates. They're upset about government. But are they really? Or are they really upset about the conditions that they're working under? And this is what the Republicans are doing so well. They're channeling that economic frustration of certain groups that they know that they can mobilize because they're already tapped into Republican rhetoric. They're channeling that into attacking the Democrats, anti-mandates. Oh, inflation's going up because Biden's not dealing with it, rather than CEOs are increasing the prices of their goods, or shippers are increasing the prices, or oil is increasing the prices so that it's more expensive. Or now truckers who may not even know that they're part of this are actually disrupting the supply chain by protesting vaccination mandates. These things are interwoven. It is political jiu-jitsu. They're using an economic moment and channeling it away from worker organizing and into anger at the government for vaccination mandates or mask mandates. Anger at Joe Biden for not dealing with the inflation that they are creating. You see how that works? Now, Joe Biden can do something about this because his economy's stupid. It's always the economy's stupid when it comes down to elections. He can do something about this. Price gouging is illegal. The laws around price gouging can be strengthened. It is something that previous presidents have been able to do unilaterally. He can do something. I know that they want the pandemic to end, partly because people just want business to go back to usual. But I think that there are some very greedy conservative CEOs in this country who, let's not forget, are donating to Republicans who love stretching out this pandemic and using supply chain as the issue so they can increase costs of goods, so they can make sure people order from their companies, so they can make more money as CEOs than ever before and keep their workers down. Of course, they love it. So Democrats do want this pandemic to end. They do want people to get their vaccines. But I also think they're reaching the point where they're fed up, which is why Kathy Hochul, I believe, removed the mask mandate. There comes a point where certain people are just never going to get the vaccine, partly because of this. So this is, as we go into the election, this is what they're doing. It is not about the supply chain. And even if it is slightly by looking at the truckers, it is about the conditions of the working class. And unless we have strong unions, which obviously people are organizing around this country and channeling that energy in the right way, the Republicans are going to try to divert as much energy away from labor and into cultural issues, into mandates, into anti-imperialist pipelines that just criticize the U.S. government, which deserves it at times, but not other governments, which makes it about Joe Rogan being canceled rather than Joe Rogan being a pipeline for radicalization. You know, Joe Rogan had Bernie Sanders on, got Bernie Sanders' audience, some of it, which was rightfully so dissatisfied with the way government was responding to their needs. And Bernie Sanders offered solutions. But once Bernie Sanders was no longer running, people are looking for an outlet. The algorithm's already geared towards young males. And that is Joe Rogan's audience. So he has on a few leftists to talk about how bad the Democratic Party is, how bad government is, the U.S. government is. And then simultaneously has people on like Jordan Peterson and then Alex Jones. And the next thing you know, a certain percentage of this country is being radicalized. And all you need is a few percent there, a few percent there, a few percent there to either stay home or vote Republican. And you lose Congress, you lose the Senate, and you possibly lose the presidency. And then I ask you, what comes after that? All right, we have a wonderful show today. We're going to be talking a lot about the economy today. We have Grace Blakeley on a little bit later. She's going to talk about what's happening with specifically with these interest rates and what it's really about. And then after that, we talk to Indigo Olivier, who discusses how right now, I don't know if you know, employers can cut off your healthcare if you strike. There's a new bill that would block that from happening. We talk about that with her. And then after that, we talk to Jamie Peck about some of the news of the day. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy time. So gear up. This is Femme Friday. See you in a second. Hello. Oh my God, I've been traveling. Like the last few days have been horrible for me in terms of traveling. Every type of delay at an airport and not missed flights, canceled flights and having to go back home and get up early in the morning, all 6 a.m. flights. You know how that feels. So basically I was sleep deprived for the last week. And I don't know if you guys ever get this, like you drink too much coffee because you're sleep deprived. And then you wake up in the middle of the night and your like body's like twitching basically. Well, that's actually happened to me a few times this week where I guess it's restless leg syndrome, or I don't know what it is, what causes it, but it's definitely due to sleep deprivation. But I'm really grateful that I have discovered Sunset Lake CBD because it helps me sleep through the night. Last night in the middle of the night, I was like, I am so tired. Why can't I stop tossing and turning? And I grabbed there it is right there, the Sunset Lake CBD oil with melatonin now. I have that next to my bed. I took a few drops and I slept the rest of the night. Deep, deep, deep sleep. The most delicious dreams. You know that feeling. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company based in Vermont. They took an old Ben & Jerry's farm and then diversified it and shifted it over to craft CBD. They grow premium hemp. They are a great company that offers their minimum wage is $15 an hour. They're also employees own the majority of their company, and they support independent media like our show, the Nomiki Show, the David Pakman Show, and the Majority Report. They've got all sorts of products that help with your aches and pains, whether it's the tincture, which helps me with my sleep and my aches and pains, or they've got chocolate, they've got lotions for when your joints are sore, or, I have a hand issue. I put it on my hand all the time. All sorts of different products. My family swears by it. I hope they're putting in Nomi because they get a discount, but I don't know if they are. But if you want a discount, you should go to sunsetlakecbd.com and type in Nomi, N-O-M-I, and you will get 20% off of your entire order. Definitely check out the gummies too. I got to say, that's what started me on this. It's dangerous, but I see them on screen right now. It's definitely worth it. Just take a few at once. Don't eat the whole bottle like I almost did one time. Go to sunsetlakecbd.com, type in Nomi, N-O-M-I, and you will get 20% off of your entire order for sunsetlakecbd.com. We will be right back with Jamie Peck. Our next guest is Grace Blakeley. Grace Blakeley is a staff writer for Tribune and the author of Stolen: How to Save the World from Financialization. Great question. Also has recent pieces out in Jacobin, of course. One titled Raising Interest Rates is about screwing workers, and the other, Billionaires Absurd and Growing Wealth Undercuts Democracy. Here, Grace. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's great to finally be able to join you.
I know. We've tried many times, and you know, the universe has like lots of other things in store for us. So this inflation issue is unbelievable. We opened the show. I had a conversation, talked about how inflation is being used as a weapon, and simultaneously the weaponization of supply chain issues are used as a weapon for political divides and organizing and splinters. Tell us a little bit, you know, what's behind this quote unquote inflation conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. That piece that I had in Jacobin in the US, it was entitled Raising Interest Rates as a Way to Screw Workers. And in the UK, it was entitled Is a Form of Class War.
Oh, interesting.
I think that was kind of interesting, an interesting little difference there between like the US and the UK context. But I mean, basically, that is what it is. If you go back to the period during which this narrative that we're seeing being rolled out again was formed, it was the 1970s and 80s, when you had this argument being kind of trotted out by what was then seen as kind of very radical element of the right, what we now know as the kind of neoliberal movement. And their argument was that inflation, this is Milton Friedman saying, is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Now, what was going on in the 1970s was that there was a dramatic spike in inflation, and that was driven by the formation of OPEC. That's that group of oil producing countries that got together, formed this group and said, we're going to control oil prices, basically. So you had two big spikes in oil prices in the early 1970s, and that drove up inflation for everything, because what are we learning now? What we known for a very long time, it's that energy prices, and particularly oil prices, feed into the prices of so many other things. Now, that's particularly true for oil because it's used to make so many different things. Like oil is not just the fuel you put in your cars. It's also hydrocarbons in plastics. It's natural gas used for fertilizer. So fossil fuels are used across our economy. And also bear in mind that they're really important when we're thinking about global logistics and transportation, and that our economies, the UK and also the US, very, very dependent on imports. So all of that means that energy prices, particularly fossil fuel prices, feed into inflation. This happened in the 1970s, and that very radical right-wing movement said, this is because of unions. This is because workers are demanding too higher wages. And at that time, we had in the UK and to a lesser extent in the US, relatively strong labor movements that could really kind of bring the economy to a grinding halt if they demanded wage increases that the bosses didn't want to give. So this was really seen as a kind of wedge to basically divide public opinion and bash the labor movement. And it worked basically because a lot of the tools that had previously been used to combat inflation during the post-war period stopped working when you had this big change in energy prices. And really the result of that, in part, it was a significant part of why we got the neoliberal revolution, was to do with all these crises around how do you deal with inflation, and also the kind of general sense that the labor movement had gotten out of control. Here we are today, and the right is once again, even after a decade of wage stagnation in the UK, even after in the US, the average worker before the pandemic was as well off in purchasing power parity terms as they were in the 1970s, even after all of that wage stagnation, they're trying to roll this argument out again. And that's why it's class war.
Well, and it's interesting. It is class war, but I love that in the American version, they say it's about screwing workers. And I want to highlight screwing workers because I think that the right wing, which I opened with on the show, the right wing understands that they have a problem in that they're trying to appear populist. Simultaneously, there's this labor movement that's growing. It is nowhere where it needs to be because of the failures of the last 40 years of the Democratic Party, siding with neoliberals and basically kicking out labor from the party while bringing in lobbyists who are union busters, in some cases, lawyers who are union busters in the Democratic Party, all around the late 1970s when you talk about this period. So these things all happened at the same time. But they know that they need, or at least the Steve Bannons of the world who are organizing this type of Republican Party, know that they need to have a robust populist movement that is disruptive enough and votes enough in specific districts, because it's all gerrymandered in the United States, that it's almost like death by a thousand cuts. They just need enough. And when I see the truckers in Canada, which of course now there's threats that they're going to be coming here for Super Bowl, they're going to be I was just actually at the Canadian border yesterday in outside of Buffalo and Niagara Falls, and we decided not to go across to Canada because of the truckers who were protesting at the border. And it's very fascinating because truckers are traditionally more conservative. They listen to conservative talk radio on these long haul routes, for several hours. They're on the road like 350 days a year or something like a little over 300 days a year. They're listening to conservative talk radio. But there's an intersection between supply chain, which is, people are saying is the excuse for inflation, and workers' rights and mandates, and all of these things are intersecting. So the worker aspect, to me, this is if the workers are frustrated, the Republican Party, the right wing, has found a way for what is horrible conditions for these truckers to channel into mandates, and then channeling the economy, using the economic situation to create a little mini movement, and then continue to blame the Democrats for inflation and the economy in an election year. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think what you've kind of put your finger on there is a problem that the left have had for a long time, which is that we tend to assume that any form of economic crisis that tends to squeeze workers will benefit the left. And that is just not true. It's not true today. It wasn't true after the financial crisis. And the reason for that is that the response to any crisis, the response to any kind of, crisis in living standards, financial crisis, whatever, the way that people make sense of that and the way that they respond to that will depend, to a great extent on the ideas that are, again, in the words of Milton Friedman, lying around at the time. The left, up until a few years after the financial crisis, did not have a strong populist narrative that was able to explain why people's living standards were falling in a way that people could relate to. The right had a very easy, very powerful, and very potent narrative. It was some sort of mix between the left, the center left has spent too much money. It's out of control, government spending. That's the reason for this problem. That's the reason for the financial crisis. And also, they've been letting in loads of immigrants, and those are the people who are stealing your jobs, using public services, using your healthcare. And without a powerful counter narrative to explain falling living standards in another way, that was what people immediately and initially latched onto. What you saw, years after the financial crisis, when we'd had the chance to build up a more powerful movement, Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, Bernie Sanders, Podemos, Syriza, all of these new movements that emerged all around the world, very much on the left, very much from a socialist perspective, said actually, no, the reason that you are doing badly is because all of the benefits of growth are being captured by an elite at the very top of our society. The same elite that caused the financial crisis, the same elite that imposed austerity, the same elite that has, been implicated in causing the climate crisis. All of these crises that we're dealing with today have been caused by basically a small number of people at the very top of society who are in control of our big corporations, our big banks, and the revolving door that exists between those institutions and the government. And that narrative was very powerful and very popular, but for a number of reasons, which we probably don't have time to go into today, it wasn't the one that ended up sticking. Yet, I think today, the right is aware that that there is some kind of latent enthusiasm for this way of explaining things, particularly when, we've seen over the course of the last couple of years during the pandemic, billionaire wealth skyrocket. Right. A few people do extremely well, while others were made to, again, bear the costs of this crisis. So as you say, they have to kind of find all these little ways of cutting up that potential coalition, because that's what they're really trying to do. They are really trying to undermine class solidarity. Bernie actually had a great quote, which was something along the lines of, if there's going to be a class war in this country, it's about time the working classes won it, which I think really gets that point. There's much class solidarity among this elite, and it's their job really to keep working people disorganized and not having that kind of coherent narrative.
That's right. And it's almost like political jiu-jitsu, right? They're taking an energy that exists and channeling it into something, which is what, Trump did so well. It's the Mexicans' fault. It's not, your employer's fault. The good news is that a lot of people are waking up to that's just BS. The bad news is that's not how electoral politics works in this country. You just need enough votes, not all of the votes or a majority of the votes. You just need enough in a coalition. I want to end with one question. I know we don't have a lot of time today, but love to have you on again because this is
I would love to come back.
Big conversation, super fascinating.
The smart women about
yes.
socialism.
Yes, it's my favorite. But the other aspect of this is, and it again goes back to the late 70s when a lot of these free trade agreements took hold. And I think about it every single time I hear about the supply chain is, we're obviously Western, Northern capitalist countries that are consumer-based economies. Our economy is entirely consumer-based as much as they want to manipulate it in different ways. And free trade and the supply chain all intersect here and this all kind of came about at the same time when labor, of course, was attacked. And in 2016, during the presidential race, this was a big dividing line between the Clinton coalition and the Bernie coalition. Was you had some more progressive labor unions and membership, even if their leaders did not endorse Bernie Sanders. The membership recognized that the free trade agreements of the late 70s and, of course, mid 90s, early 90s made a huge difference in how strong labor is in this country. Well, now we're seeing, if we haven't seen the last 2 years during the shutdowns, we're seeing it immediately. So, they're blaming, the elites are blaming, the CEOs are blaming the supply chain, which is their economic model, by the way, but they're also increasing the costs while they're making record profits. So which is it? Is this a dilemma for them, or is this an opportunity for us to say, no matter who you blame, you're at fault?
Yeah, obviously a big part of why we experience such kind of economic turmoil when different parts of the global economy shut down at different times was because of the just extraordinary interconnectedness of the world economy. Mm-hmm. And even, the virus itself spread through supply, through kind of trading routes from kind of city to city and then out from there. So, these kind of the classic thing to say at the beginning of the pandemic was we are all going to be affected by this because of the way that, these just-in-time supply chains work. Businesses are keeping less inventory. They're relying on shipments coming in very, very quickly to translate those inputs into the products they're producing. Another really interesting part of this is actually the way that global shipping has changed.
Right.
You've got these huge container ships that have to be very carefully organized when they're going in from one port out of another port. They take days and days to unload. A load of those ships just ended up basically floating around the ocean or just docked somewhere with all the workers trapped on board.
Can I just add something to this? I flew in yesterday, as I mentioned, into New York City, and we were going into JFK, and it was at nighttime, and I saw these ships, and I was like, what are they doing? They're just sitting. And of course, all these things were going in my mind. There were dozens of them. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just saw that last night.
Actually, I personally just am very, very interested in shipping just as like a thing because it's a fascinating thing. Containerization is one of these really not spoken about things that just transformed the global economy. And if you look at what's happened to global shipping over the course of the last couple of years, A, it's been massively disrupted, but B, the working conditions for some of these workers who are often sailing on these boats, which are, on the seas under flags of convenience, which basically means, they are using the labor laws of countries with the worst kind of labor laws that you can imagine. Some of them have literally been trapped on boats for years, unable to get off because they weren't able to kind of get off at the ports because the countries wouldn't let them in.
Wow,
it's really horrendous conditions, and what were already very difficult conditions for these workers. So, that whole model has been really pushed to breaking point, and we're going to continue to see this, I think, because, a kind of system as intricate and complex as global logistics can't just be shut down and then resurrected as it was before. We're really going to have to rethink how a lot of this stuff works. So supply chain issues are a massive thing, are going to continue to be a massive thing. And that coordination, which allows, chip manufacturers in Southeast Asia to coordinate with manufacturers in another part of Asia, to coordinate with consumers and managers in different parts of the world, that's all going to take a very long time really to reconstruct, to make it work again in any meaningful way. But the other thing, I think, when we talk about supply chains, we're maybe not, we could overemphasize that as actually one of the big causes of inflation, because if you really drill down into the data and you look at what's actually causing inflation, what the consumer is feeling, it is energy prices. And this really, I think, does give us a bit of a wake-up call. It's that we need to come up with a more sustainable, cheaper source of energy that can last us into the future, and also kind of allow us to decarbonize. Because oil prices sunk to zero during the pandemic. Everyone was like, great, it's the end of big oil. Of course, they immediately rebounded when economic growth started again. And now we're seeing this massive uptick, which is all benefiting the big oil companies. Exxon had its most profitable year in 7 years. All the big oil companies are having bumper profits. They're distributing it to shareholders. They're largely not using it to try and decarbonize as they promised they would. We really need to just get these companies out of our economy and start transitioning towards renewables.
You can't just put a sweater on, as Jimmy Carter said. Even though my heating company, my power company, emailed me today saying, we know that rates are higher than normal, as I'm wearing a sweater. My goodness, just stop consuming. I think that's the alternative. Maybe Joe Biden should say, guys, maybe you don't order everything off of Amazon every 5 seconds. I'm just kidding. It'd be nice if you actually crack down on these companies. Grace, super insightful, rapid round conversation. Thank you for joining us. Let's have you on again very soon. And have a great night. I know you're out in the UK right now, so
thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
We will be right back after this quick little break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Indigo Olivier is a journalist who's written for pieces for The Guardian, The Nation, Jacobin, The Conversationalist, and right now has a piece out in these times titled "A Landmark Bill Would Outlaw Bosses Cutting Off Healthcare to Striking Workers." My goodness, just another reminder that our labor laws are extraordinarily weak in this country, and there's very little oversight. Indigo, thank you for joining us and for writing this piece.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess we should start off with what are they allowed to do when workers strike? And are these legal strikes, or are these like the illegal strikes that occur with like teachers unions and public sector workers?
Well, what I was talking about mostly was legal strikes. But when you do go on strike, what happens is your pay gets cut off. That's pretty standard practice. And in certain cases, employers have the option to cut your health care off as well. And it's been used as a threat, and was recently used as a threat at the recent John Deere strike. It is completely legal for them to do so. In certain cases, unions like the UAW, which are much larger, have strike funds. So they will support their workers through like small weekly payments, and then will also in some cases cover their healthcare through COBRA benefits. But I think this is really a game changer, just because it takes away one of these key strike breaking tactics that we've seen companies use in recent years, or in decades really, but especially over the last couple of years.
So the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, is falls under the Biden administration, and of course was weakened under Trump. And I know a lot of the Biden administration hasn't really fully empowered the NLRB in many ways. Even in the last year, but the PRO Act, for instance, is this bill that is sort of like MIA right now, I guess. I don't know if you have the latest on the PRO Act, but it could obviously strengthen the NLRB and labor laws for striking. Is this a bill that could be passed in case the PRO Act doesn't get passed, or it gets broken up into pieces, or it just takes several years, while conditions are obviously very not great right now in the country?
So I think this is something that we should look at as additional legislation to strengthen worker organizing alongside the PRO Act. The question of how likely it is to pass along with the PRO Act is kind of like a separate story. And I don't think Democrats have really done enough to push for the legislation that they want to see and kind of like strategically negotiate with people like Joe Manchin and Sinema. But yeah, I think this is definitely one piece in a puzzle to strengthen labor overall. The one thing that I would say, though, is that we shouldn't rely on the NLRB too much to strengthen labor as a whole. I think the only way that we're really going to see that in a big way is if masses of organizers organize at the grassroots level and kind of demand the things that they're owed, like healthcare and the right to collectively bargain.
I've heard from Starbucks workers who I was in Buffalo this past weekend, as I mentioned in the previous segment, and learned that they would hit a lot of roadblocks and have a lot of issues in terms of strengthening their organizing, and they've been very successful, partly due to the kind of conditions and the size of a store and how these union efforts have spread so fast. It's not striking, but it's organizing. But they have said, like, if the PRO Act was passed, this would be much easier. I'm curious, like, have you interviewed any of the congressional members who co-sponsored this bill, or do you know sort of what their mentality is behind why this bill now, and are they preparing for a fight with the PRO Act?
Yeah, so there's an interesting story behind the bill. The key person who introduced the legislation, Representative Sidney Axne, a Democrat in the House, actually oversees the district where a number of the John Deere striking workers were living in. So her constituents were going through this. Again, John Deere threatened to cut their health care off. And when she heard from her constituents, she was inspired to introduce this legislation. And she started having conversations with some of her colleagues on the Hill and heard that they had also had constituents facing similar issues in recent years. Another one of the co-sponsors oversaw the district where the Kellogg's striking workers, part of the Kellogg's workers were striking. About 1,400 Kellogg's workers lost their health care during the course of that strike. So that was a big issue. So in terms of a strike, in terms of a fight, I'm not entirely sure. I was able to get some answers from Representative Axne through email. Mm-hmm. And when I asked her about how likely she thinks the bill is to pass, her answer was sort of, well, with any legislation, introduction is the first step. So I think Democrats are pretty aware that this is going to be an uphill battle, as it has been, especially with holdouts like Manchin and Sinema.
What I don't understand is, how is this even legal? I mean, there is isn't there a mandate for employers to provide health care if an employee is working? I mean, it's not, you don't know how long the strike is going to be. It could be, a week, 2 weeks, a month, but I assume, especially the Kellogg's workers and the John Deere workers, these are employees. I assume they're not at will employees. They're on salary. So how do they get away with this?
I mean, we have a system of labor laws, really business laws in this country that favor the employer. So again, like I said, when you're on strike, you don't get paid. And I think that kind of in the employer's mind, pay is linked to healthcare. So it's like, if you're not working, you're not going to get the pay or the benefits that we're giving you. Again, not every employer cuts healthcare during a strike. It is specifically used as a strike-breaking tactic when they know it's going to be a struggle with workers and want them to get them to the negotiating table and to just accept a contract and move on. But I think really it points to a larger issue in this country, which is employer-based healthcare. If we did not have an employer-based healthcare system in this country, overnight workers would already be in a better position to negotiate over things that have nothing to do with healthcare, just because they wouldn't have that threat looming over them. I also wanted to mention that, during Striketober, again, John Deere and Kellogg's workers were among some of the bigger striking groups. But during that time, healthcare was actually a huge issue that was being negotiated over at the contract table. Again, like John Deere, for instance, one of their big issues that they were negotiating over was higher premiums. They wanted to raise workers' cost of their premiums to 20%, which was a huge hike. A lot of workers have been complaining about just poor coverage overall. And UAW retirees in more recent years have also lost retiree health and benefits. So once you retire, you're no longer you no longer have health insurance.
Well, I mean, what's also crazy about this is you would think it's in the employer's interest to fight for something like Medicare for all, because it makes your workers less likely to be dissatisfied with the company. If the limited wages, which are already cutting, are not going to just like survival. So, never made sense to me at all. I never understood why big business didn't say Medicare for all is great for business. It's great for everybody. I think it's a bit of a catch-22 because, again, healthcare is a huge cost to employers, especially for large corporations. It's a huge cost. On the other hand, if they wanted to have a Medicare for all system, they know that they would have to pay more in taxes. And it also kind of just goes back to this ideological issue where even if we are spending more than twice the normal OECD country in healthcare costs because we have private health insurance, it's too close to socialism for people to really get behind. Interesting. So in terms of next steps for this bill, where does it go?
So it was recently introduced in the House. That was February 2nd. Representative Axnay is confident that it should be introduced in the Senate pretty soon. I'm not really sure where it's going to go. Honestly, not many people have covered it. I haven't heard a lot about it outside of like press releases and statements from unions. There have been a number of unions that have endorsed the bill. So the UAW, the AFL-CIO, the United Mine Workers, and a number of others have come behind this legislation. So I think we're probably going to see some cooperation between labor and representatives, and hopefully, rank and file members will be trying to support this in grassroots ways as well.
Oh my God. It's good to see the organizing. It's good to see some members, but obviously Washington's at a standstill right now. Really interesting conversation. Go check out this article, and in these times right now, it appeared on February 4th. Indigo Olivier authored a landmark bill would outlaw bosses cutting off healthcare to striking workers. Hopefully many, many bills like this in conjunction with the PRO Act, which hopefully will get a little bit more attention soon. Indigo Olivier, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we will be right back with Jamie Peck. right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. We have Jamie Peck here. She is the host of Antifada and co-host of Everybody Loves Communism, a podcast. And she's a writer too, and jackass of all trades. Jackass, why not?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Femme Friday. Okay, so Jamie, I want to start off with the thing that like at this point is like so overplayed, but we've been talking about it for so long on our show, and roll back like a year and a half ago, you were probably even on MR when I had like a thing about Joe Rogan, and everybody was like, oh, he's just a product of the system. And I was like, maybe, but he's also somebody who has Alex Jones on, and that's a conscious thing to do. And using the N-word and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, he fucking sucks.
Yeah. All right. So what do you think? There's this article. Actually, I'll lead with the article. So there's an article out that states it's obviously perspective. Joe Rogan is too powerful to keep acting as if he's just a regular guy chopping it up. But I think that part, the regular guy chopping it up, is his effing hook. That's it. I mean,
look, you can be a regular guy chopping it up about really bad things and platforming, if not alt-right, certainly alt-light people on your show who are, actually more insidious in some ways. I mean, look, do I think he has a responsibility? Like, yeah, I guess so, but he's never gonna do the right thing. So I think it's sort of pointless to kind of tisk him. I mean, this is about the platforming wars, right? Right? The cancel wars.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, he sucks. What do you want me to say? Like the idea that he was some kind of asset to the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Oh, yeah.
I think because he said one nice thing about him once, I think just shows, unfortunately, how desperate the Bernie campaign was for anything that they could hold on to that might do the trick, right? Like they were grasping at straws. This guy supported Bernie for maybe like 1 second as it flitted across the wheels and the hamsters in his mind. And that was just about it. But
let's be real. He wasn't supporting Bernie Sanders because of Bernie Sanders' socialist policies or democratic socialist policies, or frankly, like, in normal countries, which is a basis of existence in I say normal, there's no normal democracy, but it's not because of that. It's number one, because Bernie Sanders railed against the Democrats, and that's what like folks in certain circles like only love to do. It is important, but can't be the only thing. And simultaneously, like, hey, he can build more of an audience by appealing to Bernie Sanders' base. And I think that's what Bernie was trying to do, which is good because he wanted to, obviously engage folks and take them off of the right-wing pipeline. And I'm glad that Bernie did go on the show, because it's just like when, leftists go on right-wing shows and talk about the issues that they care about and fight for them and not agree with them. It's hope that a few ears hear it and come over.
Yeah. I mean, Bernie went on Fox News too. That doesn't mean I have to like them.
There you go. That's exactly it. But there's another aspect of this that I kind of want to reiterate, especially on Femme Friday, which is this guy is not being censored. They're not calling for censorship. He can go out and he can have a rally if he wants. He can go on a podcast wherever he wants. He's not being locked up in a dungeon, told he can't speak. They're not taking away his pen. They're not taking away his microphone. What was being given to him.
They're not taking away the millions of dollars from him either. Like, he's still there.
He's still there. And he is being rewarded. Do we have those opportunities? I'm going to guess you and I probably are just as effing smart, if not smarter, and engaging.
Now, let's give ourselves a little more credit than that.
Yeah,
we are both smarter than Joe Rogan.
My diet plan's better too. I've got to say my supplements are great. My supplements are great.
Oh, you selling supplements now?
Just kidding. That's his whole thing. Well, he doesn't have to now. He's like, I don't even care about the supplements anymore. That got me to where I needed to be. But he's being rewarded. He is being, it's not like he's being platformed. He's being given a very unique platform.
Yeah. I mean, look, no one's censoring anyone. That's not what censorship means. This is literally just the logic of the market at play.
That's right.
If Spotify is it's an evil company owned by capitalists. I mean, the bigger problem with Spotify, and I had the Eve 6 guy on my podcast this week to talk about it, is how exploitative they are with every single artist. That apparently the record companies own a big chunk of Spotify, which I didn't realize. So they can kind of double dip and, profit off these people's music while giving them like a fraction of a penny per stream. So I think that was a more galling thing for most people. They're like, this chud is getting $100 billion and I get like $10 a year from having my music on there, if that. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, like I really don't buy the slippery slope argument made by some nominal leftists, right? Like, oh well, if this can happen to Joe Rogan, and by the way, it can't, like it didn't, and it's not going to. But if Neil Young could get Joe Rogan kicked off of a platform, then maybe they could do it to the left as well, and that's bad for us.
It's already happening to the left.
Yeah, there's no ombudsman out there. There's no referee making sure that the left and the right get treated equally by the media. Like that's never an expectation that I've had. Like, I mean, the difference between me and like, I guess these cancel culture people who are whining about it, which includes both liberals and conservatives. I mean, they're all liberals in the classical sense of the word. Let's be real here. Is like, yeah, if I were to get kicked off of the platforms that I use for my podcasts, like that would suck for me. But like, fair enough. Like I'm out there calling for Spotify and all bosses to be expropriated every day. And if they were to decide that the threat, whatever threat I pose to them is more important than the money that they can extract from the people giving me Patreon dollars, like that would be a cool problem to have.
Well, and think about just the privilege. Like there are so many fights happening right now, and they flip this and they reversed it. I've been seeing some supposed leftists who, again, like their only brand is to defend these idiots and then attack Democrats. Again, you can attack Democrats, and that is something I think we've all done very well. But we also are talking about solutions and organizing and how to, push
the enemy. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. We are in a three-way fight right now. We need to fight the Democrats. We also need to fight the far right.
Nazis.
Yeah. They're both bad, folks.
So this is why I think it's something a little bit more nefarious and it's not just incentivized. There's a lot of ways to make money on the internet. There are a lot of ways for some of these names who definitely have opportunities to do that stuff, but they are making a conscious decision to side with a populist, pseudo-left, actual right movement pipeline to defend Joe Rogan. Like, oh, I went on a show, so I'm going to defend him. I've been on a bunch of shows. I would never literally cut a video up of my appearances and other leftist appearances on those shows and justify it. There's so many, like, okay, cool. I've been on Tucker Carlson 9,000 times. He's laughed at my jokes. I still know he's an effing Nazi. I still fight with him. And so to see them defend Joe Rogan when they could be literally talking about the PRO Act. They could be talking about the Starbucks workers right now. They could be talking about solutions to these problems. And their excuse is, why are you spending all this time attacking Joe Rogan? Because he's a symbol of this pseudo populist, whatever they are, that doesn't touch on anything related to workers ever, not actual populism, to basically like radicalize people who may not be finding the shows to talk about, channeling your energy into organizing on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, populism is a very tricky thing. Not all populism is good. If you believe right-wing populism as populism, and I think it is. We actually had an episode about this with Anton Yeager, who wrote a really good, interesting book about populism and how it functions around the world. But yeah, no, like there's nothing recuperable here for the left. Sorry, like I'm not interested in having a dialogue with right-wing thought leaders.
There
right?
you go.
Like
there you go.
I'm interested in having a dialogue with every regular person, every worker. And maybe if those workers are Nazis, they're too far gone, but most workers are not. And I'll talk to anybody, but like, yeah, a guy who makes millions of dollars a year, dabbling in chud world and spreading, what is arguably like ideas that are damaging to public health.
That's right.
Like, and not to mention the racism, the sexism, the transphobia, all that nonsense. Like, sorry if I don't think that guy is like someone I need to be thinking about when I'm deciding what to do in the world.
I mean, he idealizes Elon Musk. I mean, that's enough right there. Like, you show me your political philosophy. I don't have a political philosophy, but then like there's a million times he's, said Jordan Peterson's the smartest man in the world. No, actually, Elon Musk is. The other thing that just stands out to me with both the people who are defending him on the supposed left or who've labeled themselves as left and him is the privilege. There's this supremacy in that they're canceling me when, like I said before, there are so many thousands of people who have been doing this work for a long time who will never be awarded the opportunity, whether they're artists or media folks or organizers who are trying to get press for the work that they're doing, or folks from marginalized communities. The fact that he feels he is being censored because they took down 100 of his posts which had the N-word in it, and he has to apologize. My effing God. Imagine the level of and I'm saying white supremacy because that's the ultimate privilege. To think that this is the worst crime against you of all time, is being held accountable for things that are not even in the mainstream. Like, they're so far out that you're not losing your job for it, like workers do for striking. It's and then the people who are using their energy to defend him. I mean, I know we talk a lot about this, but like, it's gotten to the point where to see folks on the supposed left defend him and people falling for it, seeing videos of him, like, it's worked. I saw a really good friend of mine who's an organizer say, well, I didn't know you supported all these other things. I was like, yeah, he also had Jordan Peterson on and said he was the smartest person, Alex Jones on, and cut that clip up. Final thoughts, anything else?
I don't think we need to take Joe Rogan that seriously. He's not a deep thinker. Yeah, he does have the ear of millions of lonely, confused young men who need a daddy. But, maybe we just need to give them some daddies of our own.
Maybe
gotta
they need
fight
a
fire
mommy.
with fire. Or like, oh God, there was a really good tweet. I mean, yeah, I'll say it right now, guys. Joe Rogan, bad dad. Jamie Peck, great mom. That's who you want to listen to. I will give you tips for living. I'll help you talk to girls. And I will educate you on what we gotta do to unfuck the world. And maybe it'll take a little more brain power, but I think you'll be a whole lot happier on this side.
Listen, inner work is tough, and when we have toxic masculinity being spread around the world, basically like preventing people from accessing their inner feelings, just channeling it in, on guns and video games or whatever. And Joe Rogan, it's not a lot of work.
Guns are cool. Video games are fine. I don't play them, but I have no problem with them. These are all like nice neutral things to occupy your time with, nice hobbies. But like, what is there left to say? I don't know. Like, I just don't care.
That's what it is. The internet is sexist.
I just do not care about this guy at all.
I care about
not
his radicalization.
That's not important. But like, yeah, I think we need to get together and we need to keep on making good leftist media to counter all of the garbage that's being poured into people's brains from not just Joe Rogan, but the lamestream media writ large.
Yeah. And we need to demand that our lawmakers who do seem somewhat concerned about monopolization of the media, like actually do something, because this is, that's going to benefit everybody. I honestly, breaking it apart, I think will only it's so bad now that I can't even imagine anything being worse at this point. It's a 95% male audience. Like, what? That's not, Fox News isn't even that.
I think it was perhaps an ex-boyfriend of mine who said something very wise, which is that if no girls like it, it's probably not cool.
Bingo. That's it.
Think about it.
Think about it. All right. On that note, so there has been a lot of reporting on extreme violence, that is extremists who are, either advocating for violence, cosplaying and advocating for violence, or actually violent. And of course, I think people are fully aware that the conditions are ripe for this kind of situation. People have been locked at home, not working or working virtually, or, aren't socializing. It's always young boys who almost always young boys who are radicalized in these groups. And, a couple of years is a lot when you're a young boy. So turns out people don't think that the Biden administration is doing enough to tackle these white supremacist groups that are organizing openly online in a way that they did when they went after ISIS and they deplatformed a bunch of people. I get the free speech absolutists, but that's the argument that they make. You can't organize violence. That is actually protected. And, if these are the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys who are literally running for office now, and the Democratic Party is oh, by the way, we don't have a Democratic Party. Cool. Now we're going to have Congressman Oath Keeper.
Yeah. I mean, okay. First of all, I am not a free speech absolutist. I think I've been pretty clear about that. I do acknowledge it as a value, but there are other values that might be more important sometimes. I don't know, if we ever manage to do the thing and get some kind of transitional worker state, right? Dictatorship of the proletariat, if you will. Are we going to let whatever remains of the bourgeois press print a bunch of crazy lies and propaganda in an effort to fuck the world up again? No, I don't think so. I think everybody living a decent life is a little more important. Oh my God, my phone's ringing. Sorry. A little more important than that. But yeah, no, we know that liberals are not good at dealing with the far right. This has always been true throughout history. These values like free speech, if you hold them up as the most important thing and view them in a vacuum, we're sitting ducks for this kind of thing, because these people don't respect leftist values. They don't respect liberal values either, but they have no problem taking advantage of an open liberal society to spread the word, to organize, and ultimately, to try to overthrow this liberal democratic world order and implement something resembling fascism. So, am I surprised? No. But also, I don't know that the Biden administration necessarily has any of the tools that we would need to actually tamp down on the threat, right?
It's interesting because I think they're aware. I mean, obviously the FBI is reporting they're aware of it, but tools is the accurate word. It's not like they're clueless or out of touch. They just don't have the tools. They don't have the intellectual tools, the creative tools, and they're just so afraid of pissing off I don't know, Peter Thiel or something. I'm just trying to think of who their ultimate enemy is. I want to end with this one clip of Peter Navarro on Ari Melber's show on MSNBC, which is an interesting choice for him to go on.
Tell me more. I know nothing of this.
Let's see it. Let's be educated.
Again, not on my radar. I think it's
that was an answer. I appreciate the answer, not on my radar. Peter. Yeah, I appreciate the answer. So the follow-up is: did you or your staff ever attend or arrange any meetings to discuss that plan?
I never attended anything. I read in the newspaper that one of my staff members, without my knowledge, may have been involved. I have no knowledge of that. But no, I had nothing to do with that. And by the way, in the In Trump Time book, I am on record
something to do with
as criticizing.
You just said you
Sidney
had something
Powell,
to do with it.
For pardon me?
Sorry, sir. I said you had something to do with it if your aide facilitated it. Let me give the background here as part of the interview, and then let me let you respond. I have no knowledge of
what he did. I don't know if he did it or not. All I've seen are things.
Well, you're saying you don't know.
No.
Let me put this up for the viewers, and then I'll let you respond. New York Times. Yep.
No, sorry.
New York Times.
Well,
Flynn
New
and
York
Powell.
Times.
Peter.
Yeah.
Peter, I'm gonna let you respond.
The New York Times is not always true.
Well, that's why you're here to discuss it, aren't you? So let's hear it, and then you can respond to it.
Sorry, I'm as straightforward with you as I am with everybody.
I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it to the viewers. Flynn and Powell arrive at the White House to discuss their plan to use the military to seize voting machines. They were escorted in by an aide to Peter Navarro. That aide, who you said you're only hearing about this later, and this matters, Peter. I'm sure you can see why this matters, especially if you want to condemn the plan. Here's what your aide said publicly about it.
I waved in General Flynn and Sidney Powell on the 18th, on the Friday night of the 18th, for which Mark Meadows' office revoked my guest privileges. I could no longer get people into the complex after that.
That's your aide. He helped make sure that meeting happened in the Oval. It was about abusing military power for a plan that ultimately wasn't carried out because, and then I'll let you respond, because Rudy Giuliani said if they actually followed that, everyone would end up in prison. Was it wrong for your aide to facilitate that meeting, and was that plan to involve the military bad?
I have no comment on that. I had no knowledge of that.
Oh my God. Okay, so if Rudy Giuliani is really the defender of what's right in the moment, when it's like, are we doing I thought we were doing a subtle coup. You guys want to do the over like the actual coup? We weren't on the same page, guys. Which coup are we down with?
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been following the minutia or really any of the controversy over the Republicans trying to do coups via I guess there's a few different models, right? I guess there's the overtly direct action model like we saw in January 6th. That didn't work very well. There's the legal model through the courts, which I guess Giuliani probably favors. And you know, as a corollary to that, obviously passing voter restriction laws everywhere through state legislatures. I mean, look, it's not good, folks. The Democrats are, I'm sorry if I don't think that they're going to be very effective at fighting back against this. I mean, liberal democracy is on fire, and not just here, all over the world. And, you know, we talk about this a lot on the Antifada, like, as people on the far left who want to overthrow liberal democracy and implement socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it. Like, what is our role in any of this? I mean, like, what can we even do about it? Not a lot, I don't think. Like, I really think the only answer is to keep on organizing in autonomous, class-independent ways. You know, organize a tenant union, organize a labor union, wherever you are, because things are falling apart. And I really don't think that there's that much we can do about all of it until, until things degrade to such a point.
That's exactly. I think there's going to come a point, and I hate that, like, this is even, you're actually seeing it in a very micro way. You're seeing like some Democrats who are just like, Biden Democrats are now criticizing Biden and being like, "Oh, Bernie Sanders is right." And 4 years ago, they wouldn't even touch Bernie Sanders. Or you're seeing like mini radicalizations, like and obviously not full scale, but Brian Higgins, for instance, standing by the Starbucks workers in Buffalo and co-authoring a bill that would go after companies who, you know, cut healthcare for strikes. That's mini, but that's a lot different than where he was 5-10 years ago. And so you're seeing kind of this like their death by 1,000 cuts. We're kind of like birth by 1,000, I don't know, like steps or something. But with that being said, I think it's partly because like the insurrection was a day where it's like, really, we're spending all of our energy going after the Bernie Sanders left who just wants effing healthcare and like fair wages and like protections instead of the Nazis taking over the Capitol. And there's going to come a moment where the Biden administration or whoever's in charge, the Democrats are going to, the ones at the top are going to say like, it's just not worth protecting the tax incentives for like 12 people on this planet. It's just not worth it. I hope that's what's going to happen. I know in the DNC membership, it's happening. You know, the DNC chair who was put in there by Biden is now at war with the Biden administration because he's not allowed to do anything to put money into state parties. That was not a conversation 4 years ago. That was a 50-50 issue. It isn't 100% issue with exception. And so it's basically like the curtain, you know, is being pulled back on like where the buck stops when your own party and the left, of course, is expecting the liberal institutions to do something because we don't have the power. I think they're going to be forced. I think it's like, the radicalization is going to force their hand. Biden, he doesn't want a coup. I'm guessing if he's awake.
Yeah. I mean, look, they repelled the threat on January 6th pretty easily, I think, as that's their job. Like the security state does its job when it's time to protect itself and its institutions. But like, yeah, no, it's a real dilly of a pickle. And I think things are going to get worse before they get better, if they ever get better. But I don't think that liberal democracy is necessarily fixable at this point. I don't think it is. Well, like it works the way that it's intended to, right? We have a liberal democracy. It supports the bourgeois state. It keeps capital accumulation chugging along. Yeah, we just need to be organizing and get ready because I really think there could be a collapse within our lifetimes. I feel crazy saying that, but like, look at what's already happened in only the last few years. So what I would say is get to know your neighbors.
That's
form groups with other people. Grow some vegetables on the roof and buy a gun. That's my bottom line whenever I think about the
Killer Mike says.
Why
is it we can't have guns and all the white guys get them?
Yep.
All right. On that note,
really changed my opinion on that. I gotta say.
Listen, how about everybody gets a gun except for the young white boys?
If you are at a high risk for becoming a school shooter, don't get a gun. Everybody else.
Or maybe it's basically anybody that's like under the age of where your brain is completely formed. They shouldn't do it in the military. They shouldn't do it. Like, can you imagine if every military in the world was just like 45-year-old men? Like if they wanted to go the male route, like fine, make it 45 and up. And also ban Viagra and steroids. And then we don't have a problem.
I really like this misandry tip you've been on lately.
I'm a big fan of it. Well, it's always been there, and now I'm just like, the Nazis are like taking over. I'm gonna go my route. This is all hands on deck. Sounds funny until Rep Rab introduced a bill based on what we were talking on the show. In the Philippines, it works. You don't know. Someone's gonna hear it. Jamie Peck, thanks for joining us for Fun Friday.
Thanks
Much love
for having me.
All right, everybody. And if you are not already, make sure to join us on Patreon. Because this is how the show runs. You know that. Independent media. We don't got Joe Rogan bucks. We don't got Alex Jones money. That's bad money, as you know. We are entirely supported by your support, your viewership, and of course the patrons who have joined us along this crazy ride. Patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. There's all sorts of levels starting at $5. If you used to be a patron, if you can't afford, please email us at nomikishow@gmail.com. We'll make sure that we work it out. And if you can give more to help sponsor others, hey, it's a community. This is how this works. We also have lots of swag and special benefits. So go join us at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. All right, everybody, have a wonderful weekend. We will see you on TNS Live on Tuesday at 8 p.m. In the meantime, stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. We clash flash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melted pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.